Hi, Maria. It's time. We are live.
Thank you, Harun. Good afternoon, everyone. A very warm welcome. Before we begin this session, we just want to let you know that the session is being recorded and will be available on the Alumni UK website and channels for other you fellow alumni members who are unable to attend today. With that, I'd like to introduce myself. My name is Mariam Kadir, and I'm the program manager for the Sindh and Balochistan region for the Higher Education Mobility Team at the British Council, Pakistan. Thank you to each one of you for joining us to discuss this very important topic of rethinking talent, building neuro-inclusive workplaces in South Asia. We're delighted to have you join us from across Bangladesh, India, Nepal, Pakistan, Sri Lanka, and beyond. A special thanks to the fantastic speakers who have taken the time out to be on the panel today. Our webinar will run for 90 minutes and we encourage
Hi, Mariam. Just wanted to make a check. Are you still with us? Or it's me who's not able to hear Mariam.
No, Mariam is not audible anymore.
I believe her connection has dropped.
So yes, I'm back. Apologies, little bit of tricky connection here in Pakistan. Am I audible now?
Absolutely, you
Yes.
are.
Perfect. Just give me one moment. Let me check my uh, technicalities here are sorted, so this doesn't happen again. All right. Apologies with that. So I'll go back a little bit. Like I said, my name is Mariam Kadir, and I'm the program manager for the British Council here in Pakistan. And I'd like to begin by introducing our team today that has made possible this session. So we have Agatha Gomes from Bangladesh, Vishu Sharma from India, Usman Khan from Pakistan, and Hamima Hani from Sri Lanka. Harun, just checking again, am I audible?
Yes, Mariam, you are.
Perfect, perfect. So before we begin, I would like to provide you with a brief overview of our alumni engagement strategy and how we engage with UK alumni in the region, and also highlight some of the upcoming events and the past events across South Asia. So at the Alumni UK, our mission is to create a meaningful engagement with our alumni wherever they are in the world. Our strategy is focused around four key thematic areas of employability and careers, learning and development, networking and showcasing. And these activities are tailored to different stages of alumni career, from more recent graduates to established professionals, to ensure everyone benefits from the network. Our vision for the UK alumni engagement in South Asia is to establish a prestigious network of UK alumni who can play an active role in driving the economic growth and prosperity of the region. So the Alumni UK platform is a hub for connection and opportunity, and you will find different type of resources here. You will have access to exclusive industry events, expert-led masterclasses, helping you continue your professional development. The platform also opens doors to new opportunities for collaboration, allowing you to showcase your expertise on a global stage, and connects you with our vibrant network of UK alumni, no matter where you are in the world. So here's a snapshot just to give you an idea of activities that for Pakistan, this is our calendar activity for the upcoming year. If you want to find out what's happening in your country or near you, visit the British Council country website and visit our events page. There are online events that you can join. There are also in-person events in Pakistan and in other countries. The link is on the bottom left of the screen. So the South Asia Alumni UK webinar takes place every quarter. Through these webinars, we try to bring expert UK alumni to shed light on some of the issues affecting our region. And we would love to hear from you about what you would like to see in the future. So do reach out to us. But here is a snapshot of the webinars that are previously held and some upcoming programming for the next two quarters as well. So in the next few slides, I'll take you through some of our more recent alumni engagements across the region. And these images show the variety of formats from workshops to networking events and the energy that alumni brings to each one of them. We are proud of the connections being made and the projects being initiated. Last year, Bangladesh hosted an Alumni UK Gala Night. A total of 250 UK alumni participated in this face-to-face networking event and showcased their work and achievement. Similarly, last year in Mumbai, we successfully held Alumni UK Symposium, where alumni were able to network, share feedback with us, and engage in interesting dialogues and discussions. In Pakistan, we held networking events across major cities, including Islamabad, Lahore, and Karachi. And each event featured a panel discussion on topic of leadership in action. The dialogue facilitated representation from UK alumni from different backgrounds, challenges they faced, and how they overcame these challenges. So this is a picture from our UK alumni networking event that took place in Islamabad. And similarly, in Lahore, we also had a networking event. So these are three major networking events that happen across the major cities of Pakistan. And this is a picture from our Karachi event. So as part of our annual programming, last year we hosted full-day professional development trainings across major cities of Karachi, Lahore, and Islamabad. And so these trainings were led by UK alumni themselves. We also had ACCA Pakistan, who led brief discussions and sessions across all cities and shared professional development opportunities with UK alumni. The theme of the training in Islamabad was Innovating with Purpose, Future Skills for a Sustainable and Ethical World. Similarly, in Lahore, the theme of the training was overall well-being and mental health. We had expert UK alumni. One of the sessions was led by actually a husband and a wife, both physicians, about the challenges that the South Asians generally feel in terms of their health, things like diabetes, obesity, staying active, and how to overcome these in the stagnant lives that we lead, unfortunately. And then we had another session that was led by a psychiatrist, and it was on mental health and the effects that the digital world that we live in have on our mental health as a result of it, and how to cope with these pressures. In Karachi, the theme of the trainings were empowering alumni for ethical and inclusive future-ready workplaces. The training topics included tackling workplace harassment and the legal recourse or other avenues to deal if unfortunately it does end up happening with somebody, and leadership in action, and a lot more. So these are quite packed days with a lot of energy, and thank you if you were a part of it. We hope that you join us this year as well. Lastly, I would like to briefly talk about alumni awards. So the Study UK Alumni Awards are highly coveted and recognized around the world. Outstanding UK alumni in the categories of business and innovation, culture, creativity, and sport, science, sustainability, and social action were recognized for their achievements across participating countries. The UK universities themselves take part by celebrating UK alumni on their social media channels, and they share personalized congratulatory videos for our ceremonies. So the application for the awards will open on 1st September 2026. Do not miss your chance to apply and showcase your achievements to a global audience. The awards take place first on a national level, followed by finalists and winners competing on a global level. So all the winners and finalists are entered in a global competition, and the global finalists and winners are invited to the UK to attend the ceremony over there. Next, I would like to share a video with the highlights of the recent UK Alumni Awards that we had in 2026.
Tonight, we celebrate excellence, leadership, shared values.
Our Alumni Award is to celebrate individual career success of our outstanding alumni.
This award means a lot. Studying in the UK and then implementing it in Indonesia really changed me a lot, including providing impact for Indonesian society as well.
All of our alumni demonstrate how a UK education can help people with the confidence to address complex challenges in their communities and profession.
I'm deeply grateful to the British Council It's truly an honor to receive this award.
Through this platform in Pakistan, we are connecting with each other and the wonderful work that we have been doing for our people.
Shared knowledge has the power to change the world. Aim high, be bold. Remember that the education, it is a key to build our nation and to make a real difference globally.
Again, just a reminder, the applications open on 1st of September 2026. You can find more information on study-uk.britishcouncil.org. And once you land on our homepage, you'll need to click after your studies and you will see the section on Alumni Awards. The last opportunity that I would like to talk about and highlight is the Alumni UK Grant Program by the British Council, providing funding for international UK alumni focusing on climate action, sustainability, inclusion, and empowerment. The applications are right now open in India and Pakistan. The deadlines are fast approaching. The deadline for India is 2nd August 2026, 5 p.m. Indian Standard Time. Pakistan, the applications close on 7th August 2026, 5 p.m. Pakistan time. The links to get more information about these climate action grants is on your screen, so don't miss out. If you are doing any interesting projects in the two thematic areas mentioned, make sure that you apply for the funding and take your projects further. So I would now like to turn to today's panel discussion on the topic of rethinking talent, building neuro-inclusive workplaces in South Asia. And I'd like to begin with a simple observation. So, around the world, we're talking a lot about future of work, about AI, digital transformation, and the skills we need for tomorrow. But the conversation that still doesn't receive enough attention is how we create the workplaces where people with different ways of thinking, learning, and processing information can genuinely thrive. Across South Asia, we are all at a different stage of that journey. Some organizations are making encouraging progress, while others are only beginning to understand what neurodiversity means and why it matters. And that's okay, because meaningful change starts with the conversations like we're having one today. So today is not about having all the answers. It's about learning from one another. We have an incredible panel that I'm very proud of. We representing Bangladesh, India, Pakistan, and Sri Lanka. And each panelist brings a unique perspective that's shaped by policy, advocacy, research, professional expertise, and lived experiences. Today, we'll explore what neuro-inclusive workplaces really look like, the barriers that still exist, and perhaps most importantly, the practical steps employers, educators, and policymakers can take to move from good intentions to meaningful action. So with that, it is my pleasure to introduce our panelists. We have with us Tanjila Mazumder Drishti, who's a development professional with over 12 years of experience driving cross-sector partnerships for policy impact across Asia. She is currently working as a regional lead for Asia at BRAC International. She specializes in fostering collaboration between governments, academia, and industry to advance inclusive growth and sustainable development. Having worked across 10 Asian countries, Drishti has cultivated strong partnerships, consistently translating strategy into measurable outcomes. Her extensive regional expertise has given her deep understanding of Asia's policy dynamics, stakeholder ecosystems, workforce needs, and governance landscapes. A culturally astute professional, Drishti excels in navigating complex and cross-cultural partnerships, driving collaboration across diverse stakeholders. She holds a master's in globalization, business and development from the Institute of Development Studies, University of Sussex, UK. Tanjila, thank you so much for being on the panel today. Warm welcome to you. Next, we have with us Kavya Mukhija, a Chevening Scholar, and an MSc student at UCL East Global Disability Innovation Hub. She won the 2024 Dyna Award for her work on disability inclusion. In May 2024, she co-authored a chapter on education access for children with disabilities in India, contributing to a Supreme Court ruling in November 2024 that recognized accessibility as a fundamental right. Kavya founded Namaste Disability, a virtual peer support group, and was the NCPEDP Javed Abidi Fellow and leading research on accessible tourism in Jaipur, India. She's a content creator. She has reached over 100,000 people through digital content, raising awareness about disability stigma. Currently, she's working as a research associate for the Project Ability Empowerment at the Alternative Strategies for Handicapped, ASTHA. Welcome, Kavya. Thank you so much for being with us on the panel today. It's really an honor having you. From Pakistan, we have Isma Khan, BCBA, IBA, board certified behavior analyst, international behavior analyst, and founder of iCare, an ABA therapy center in Karachi, Pakistan, established in 2019. With over 13 years of experience, she specializes in supporting autistic children and individuals with developmental differences through evidence-based intervention, parent coaching, and professional training. In 2017, she became the first internationally certified BCBA living and practicing full-time in Pakistan. Isma's passion is helping children reach their fullest potential by developing meaningful communication, functional independence, school readiness, everyday life skills. Beyond clinical practice, she's a passionate advocate for neurodiversity, having hosted a 12-week autism awareness segment on Dawn News Channel and delivered workshops across Pakistan to promote greater understanding of inclusion and acceptance. Isma holds a bachelor's degree in psychology from the University of Warwick and a master's in applied behavior and analysis with an emphasis in autism from the Ball State University, US. Isma, very warm welcome. Thank you for being with us today. Our last speaker is from Sri Lanka, Janit Itapana. His pronouns are he and him. He's a psychology educator, disability inclusion specialist, and advocate for equitable workplaces across South Asia. He's a psychology graduate from Coventry University who combines professional expertise with lived experiences to advance disability inclusion, accessibility, and neuro-inclusive workplace cultures. Janit has served on the executive boards of Commonwealth Children and Youth Disability Network and Commonwealth Youth Health Network and has mentored more than 500 young people. He's also partnered with multinational companies, corporate networks, and grassroots organizations to promote inclusive policies and practices. Janit is passionate about helping organizations create environments where everyone can thrive. What an excellent panel we have today. Thank you once again for being with us today. We are delighted to have you. I'd like to begin this conversation with you, Tanjila. Tanjila, you have worked across 10 Asian countries on cross-sector partnerships. What patterns have you seen in how governments, academia, industry approach or avoid neurodiversity and disability inclusions in the workplace policy?
Thank you, Mariam.
Tanjila, if you can unmute yourself and turn your camera on.
Thank you so much, Mariam, for that very, very timely question. And it's interesting how there's this one word that you use in that question, which is whether they go forward with inclusion or do they avoid inclusion somehow, right? So I think talking about government, talking about the entire of Asia, first of all, and talking about governments, academia, and industry, that's a big canvas. So I would like to narrow it down a little bit because the region we have representation here from is South Asia. And in South Asia particularly, and I don't know if my fellow panelists would agree with me, our governments tend to have very nice policies. So everything is there in the policy documents and everything. However, how much of that is actually getting translated into execution and into industry practice? That remains a question. Unfortunately, I think the major hiccup from my observation and my work experience remains across major industry buy-ins around Asia, because industries remain reluctant to push meaningful, meaningful steps for having neurodiversity inclusion within the workforces. And like even in the, like you were saying in the beginning of the introduction of the session, that we are in different places in terms of the industry. Some companies are starting, some companies are still trying to understand the concept of neurodivergence. But I would tend to disagree a little there, because I think even in the companies, especially across South Asia, where they say that they are embracing neurodiversity, it is still limited to a little bit of tokenism, if I may say so. So I think vastly there's a major need of having the right understanding of what neurodivergence means and what kind of steps are necessary in order to translate those very nice policy documents into industry practices, which would then help us build or rebuild and reimagine the future of work in our part of the world. And in doing so, I think there are three major hiccups or barriers that I see in the industry nowadays. The first issue, which is very basic, is the lack of awareness and understanding of the concept of neurodivergence, and this popular public mindset, which because our companies are our people, like they are not disconnected from the people that we have in this region. And the popular mindset is that if you're differently abled, it somehow means that you're weak, which is not the case. So I think this wrong understanding and wrong painting of neurodivergence, that is something that needs to be troubleshooted at this point. There's also a severe lack of policy enforcement from the government. Governments across this region may have had policies in place or acts in place which are very nicely resting on certain shelves in the legislation offices. There might be quotas in theory, but whether or not that's actually leading to meaningful engagement of individuals with neurodivergence in the workforce, that remains a very big question mark. And thirdly, I think the most important part is when talking about shifting, having major system shifts as such, we often tend to put a lot of these burdens on the state or the governments, whereas the majority of the jobs in South Asia are created by the private sector. So the government is not the major employer, unfortunately, here. So if we want to talk about the future of workplaces, we have to talk about how do we shape mindsets of private sector and have more ownership from the private sector so that they see this not as a charity case or a tokenism case, but as an investment to improve their work systems. I would like to bring to light two key statistics. One, as per Deloitte's research, roughly 1 in 5 adults globally are neurodivergent. And the second one is an ILO report that suggests that systematic exclusion of differently abled individuals cost low and middle income economies between 3 to 7% of GDP loss annually. So I would like to end by saying that the major barriers are what I just said, the 3 points. We need to have a heavier focus on shifting mindsets in the private sector because neuro-inclusion is both an equity issue and an economic growth issue. And unfortunately, we don't talk about the latter enough. So I would end at that for now. And if you have any further questions, happy to jump in.
Thank you, Tanjila, for setting the scene from a regional perspective. And I think you highlighted some issues that are, I would say, at least from Pakistan's, they're prevalent across the region, such as tokenism or not taking the private sector, not taking enough ownership and having this loss, economic loss factored in, which they're not capitalizing in. So Kavya, I'd like to turn to you now. Kavya, you have contributed to a Supreme Court ruling that recognized accessibility as a fundamental right in India. What would meaningfully applying that principle look like inside a workplace beyond just the physical infrastructure?
Thank you, Mariam. Thank you for the question, and thank you for having me at this panel today. It's really nice to be among such amazing leaders from the Indian subcontinent. I feel that the biggest misconception that we have around disability inclusion is that accessibility begins and ends with ramps, elevators, and accessible toilets. But if you look at it from a rights-based perspective, it's only one part of the picture. Accessibility may be an important component, and it is an important component of inclusion, but it's not everything that entails inclusion. So if you look at it from a rights-based perspective, and if I iterate what is enshrined in the United Nations Convention of the Rights of Persons with Disabilities, that is the UNCRPD, we will see that accessibility needs to be embedded right from the beginning of the employee journey. So not just when we have an individual with a disability coming into the organization, but right from where we think of hiring a person with a disability.
Not
So
as an
that
afterthought.
exactly, not as an afterthought. So that means that we make job advertisements accessible. We ensure the accommodate verbal speech, but also sign language, gestures, eye pointing, the entire spectrum of communication that not just people with disabilities, but all of us use at various points, right? That also ensures that employees do not have to fight for assistive technologies and reasonable accommodation. It is provided to them without them requesting for it. It also entails, making digital platforms like websites, mobile applications accessible. A lot of people use screen readers and they cannot access these opportunities because they never reach them. Their screen readers do not tap these opportunities. And finally, it also means that we create cultures where, again, requesting for accommodation is not seen as a special treatment. It's nothing special about asking for an accommodation. It's something very basic and something very minimal that helps us live, not live, maybe just survive, in the very most basic of sense of the word. And and finally, when we design organizations, again reiterating um, design principles, we need to focus on a universal design approach, because that emphasizes that we design public places and spaces and environments that work for the widest range of people, not just for persons with disabilities. And I'm sure a lot of people in the room would also agree that we tend to use a ramp more often than stairs. That in itself says a lot about universal design. And finally, when we hire disabled people, we need to just keep one thing in mind, that it is about recognizing that talent is distributed across society, but oftentimes opportunities are not. And this is where, and this is why we need to start working towards removing barriers that, of course, do not lower the standards. They instead remove the unnecessary barriers that are in the way of people accessing these opportunities.
Thank you, Kavya. I think you've made some very interesting points over there about, where does the accessibility start? I'd like to bring Isma into the conversation now. Isma, how has Pakistan's understanding of neurodiversity evolved over the past decade? And what still needs to change for neurodivergent individuals to be recognized for their strengths, accepted by the society, and given meaningful opportunities to thrive? Isma, if you can unmute yourself.
Sorry, yes. Yes, sorry. So good morning to everyone, and thank you for the introduction, and nice to meet you all. South Asia is a home to extraordinary talent, innovation, potential, and it's a privilege to be part of this conversation with all of you, to hear everyone's stories and backgrounds and come together for a much bigger purpose, which I think is achievable if we really look ahead, because many parts of the world have already progressed in that direction. So I'm going to go ahead and answer your question. So first of all, talking about the title, Rethinking Talent, Building Neuro-Inclusive Workplaces in South Asia. So this is really an invitation to challenge how we define ability. So neurodivergent refers to people whose brains process differently, they learn, communicate, or experience the world in a way that perhaps is different to typical individuals. And these differences are natural variations in how the brain works. So it's not a deficit and it's not illnesses. So building neuro-inclusive workplaces means creating environments where different ways of thinking are recognized as strengths. So when I moved to Pakistan in 2017 as one of the first few BCBAs, well, when I moved back, I was the first BCBA based in Pakistan. I found that there was a lot of lack of awareness in the field of autism and other developmental delays or various neurological differences. And during this period, I hosted a national television morning show to discuss. So my forte is predominantly autism, and I discussed it on various topics. And I found that initially there was a lot of lack of awareness on the topic. And after that, I found that awareness increased with time. And after that, it changed. The perspectives changed. So in my experience, one of the biggest challenges that we face as a society is that there's a very narrow definition of the word talent. So when someone is neurodivergent, we often focus first on what they might find difficult instead of asking what strengths they might bring and how they learn best and where they can truly excel. So in my own work in Pakistan, I've worked with neurodivergent children who've had exceptional skills. I had a client who was not vocal, is still not vocal, but is an insane genius and can type. So he knows answers to current affairs, like who's the president of Pakistan or the US, and who is an Italian pianist, the best Italian pianist. So he's got a world of knowledge which comes out in typing, but not vocally. But that child is very intelligent and has the potential to be included in our workplace in the future. So I think the most important thing is, one of the things in our culture is we face misconceptions that the cause of such children is supernatural reasons. And I understand that it's important to bring faith into these things, but ultimately, to help such children, you need to have evidence-based intervention, educational and professional support. So stigma remains a significant barrier. We find that parents tend to hide their children. And if they do hide their children, they say, oh, what will people think? There's a fear of judgment. Then, of course, awareness is going to be not much there. So I think the most important thing is parents need to be the biggest advocates for their children, because no one else is going to be. And if they are, they are more present in our society, which means we recognize them as individuals with their own talent and their own abilities. And that in itself would help in including such children in various workplaces. So ultimately, I believe that the conversation needs to shift from asking how do we help neurodivergent individuals fit into society to asking how do we build a society that recognizes and values different ways of thinking. Every neurodivergent individual has something valuable to contribute. Our role as professionals, educators, employers is to create environments where those strengths can be recognized, developed, and celebrated, because talent is everywhere, but opportunity should be as well.
Thank you so much, Isma. I think you made some very interesting points over there, that the whole spirituality and the cultural outlook on conditions such as autism. And I know you advocate for these children, and I've seen your videos online, and you talk about these totkas and peer babas and trying to fix something that possibly doesn't need fixing. So thank you for like setting that, bringing that into this conversation, because I feel that it's not a Pakistan specific problem. It's possibly a regional and maybe even a global issue of how these children or these adults need to be sort of taken for the talent they have and the abilities they have. Thank you. I'd like to turn to Janik now. Janik, you combine professional training with lived experience. How has that dual perspective shaped the way you advise organizations on accessibility and inclusion?
Thank you, Mariam, for that question. And it's a pleasure to actually listen to my fellow panelists. And so to bring a little perspective to this, I am a person with a physical disability. Of course, this screen does not show it. And of course, and something that you also do not see is I do have an implant which helps me to drain a certain cerebrospinal fluid, CSF in short, that is also not visible. So that is my lived experience. So lived experience for me is my compass where I direct my attention to. And my professional experiences, my advocacies give me the blueprint to advise organizations. So, and to put it into a little bit of relatable perspective, all of us here would have received an email that was a bit too lengthy and or a bit too vague. And we're like, okay, what does this person want? And when do I need this? When do I get this? And it's each and every one of us. So neurodiversity is more often labeled, okay, there are people who think typically in majority number, and when it's less in number, we think it's abnormal, which is a word that we don't usually want to speak about. So each and every one of us in this room has a different way of thinking. So that itself is neurodiversity. And when you combine both the way of thinking and this, okay, there are different different ways of thinking, and that gives a lot of, and taking that example of receiving an email way past to the night, that demands a lot of cognitive energy, that demands a lot of effort from ourselves. So all of us go through this. And when you combine both of cognitive energy, operational efficiency, and even systemic friction that organizations go through, why is this person not replying to me? Why is this person not talking to me? Why is this person always wearing headphones? That ways of, I'm not experiencing this. That is how organizations more often you see it. But if we really look back and if we really understand our employees and the people that we are working with, they have a different perspective. And my dual perspective of lived experience and professional experience gives me the foundation on how to redesign organizations, how to rethink how people think, and how people actually sometimes feels, okay, it's a bit too much. I need to shut off my brain, figuratively, and just take some time. We all go through that. So to end off my little conversation for this question is, we all have our normal. Let's think about our normal and think how we can accept and accommodate for all of our different way of normal. And that is not me saying this. This is actually from Amir Khan from Sitare Samipar. And
Thank you,
let's build
Janet.
it.
Janet, you actually say something very interesting. You say about everybody's normal is different, and I think in the corporate culture, a lot of times it's the same mold for everyone, and that does not make them the most efficient person, because they, as Isma also said, talent varies, right? We need to maybe rethink about the how we define talent. So thanks for adding that. And now, we've heard how neurodiversity is being understood across the region from all of you, and the different policy and societal contexts shaping that journey. And in the next round of questions, I'd like to move from the broader landscape to implementation and what meaningful neuro-inclusion actually looks like in practice and what organizations can do to create that lasting change. So Tanjila, coming back to you, so from your experience translating strategy into measurable outcomes, what does successful neuro-inclusion actually look like on the ground beyond the policy documents?
Thank you, Mariam, and really enjoying the discussion so far. I would actually want to start responding to that question with a rhetorical question to you. Have you ever heard of an individual with, like, let's say, a neurodivergence, condition like autism, ADHD, or dyslexia in your country who has become a CEO of some company, which was not founded by them? On the top of your mind?
I actually, I can't think of anybody. No. And I think, I'm sure there are people, but a lot of times, at least in Pakistan context, people will try not to talk about it, even if they are on the spectrum or they suffer from, or they have the ADHD condition, excuse me. But, it's, I don't think people are comfortable because of how the society is around them.
Agreed. So I think the first barrier towards having a successful neuro-inclusion is that acceptance of, whether or not you are on the spectrum, whether or not it is okay in that setup to talk about being on the spectrum and needing accommodations at the workplace in order to succeed. The other thing is, like, because on the top of your mind, and I want to ask the same question to my fellow panelists, if you have heard of somebody on the top of your mind, like, in 5 seconds, if you can think about somebody who went on into a corporate ladder, climbed up to being a CEO with being on the spectrum. And I think the answer might be no. So nod your heads if you have not heard.
You can please unmute yourself and chime in.
Yeah.
Have to think
I
about
can see
it.
nodding. Yeah. So everyone's shaking their heads. And I have also not known, unfortunately, anybody who was able to climb up the corporate ladder and be there despite having, supportive policies in place since 2013 in my country. So that sort of shows you how stark the gap has been between, having a policy in place and having right measures in place to be able to help help individual with different neuro abilities to succeed in the corporate ladder. And having said that, I think this brings me to your question, what would a successful neuro-inclusion look like beyond policy documents? I think the major issue here is going to be from an HR perspective or from an employer perspective, retention, not just hiring. So many of the organizations in our part of the world, what they tend to do is, like, if there's an agenda, like, let's say if there's out of the big global strategies or the regional strategy papers that they produce every 5 years, if there's one line that says that you need to have an inclusive workplace, they will quickly make it like, X percentage of the employees need to be either differently able or neurodivergent. So they're essentially creating a tick box where they're ticking off by hiring people who are neurodivergent, but are they really creating a pathway in the organization for these people to meaningfully engage and meaningfully contribute, use their individual skill sets, or further polish their individual skill sets to reach a point where they then become the leadership of the organization at some point? And unfortunately, if that has not happened in 1.5 decades, even after having fantastic policies in place, I don't know if they will happen anytime soon, just on the basis of having policies in place. So there's a drive that needs to happen in order to sort of make our corporate culture unlearn and relearn what it actually means to be neuro-inclusive in the workplaces. The second step would be having necessary accommodations built into the default system instead of granting case by case favors. So if you have an individual who is neurodivergent in your team, and if you think that you are constantly making case by case exceptions for this person, in your human mindset and from a cultural perspective, you would end up thinking that you are doing them a favor, but that's not the case. It is your fault that your organization already, while hiring this person, was not ready to have this person enabled into the workforce to reach their full potential. So that's the second thing. And the third thing, I think I would want to end with having more measurable shifts in decision-making power. If as an organization you are committing that I will have X percentage of individuals who are differently abled or neurodivergent in my workforce, then also have individuals who are neurodivergent and differently abled on your boards. Because if there is a gap at the governance level, and there is a gap at the people you're hiring at entry points, then you will never understand as a decision-making body as to what is required. So just don't hire individuals for tick boxing, because it's not helping you as a company, it's not helping you as a manager, it's not helping that individual. Because many of the times we have seen that people, after getting hired through a tick boxing HR practice, they end up leaving the job because they have had such a bad experience in the company, and it further affects their self-esteem even more in life. So, and the cultures that we live in across the panel does not make it easy in any way. So I would want to stop at that. And like I said, it's about getting those policy things into practice with the right mindset.
Thank you, Tanjila. I think you've made some really solid points. And I think for me, for one takeaway was having somebody in the leadership level who has a lived experience and who can, guide and take the policies forward. Kavya, turning to you, your work through chronic pain India led to pain disability scale being included in India's disability assessment guidelines. Chronic pain, like many neurodivergent conditions, is often invisible. What do you think employers most misunderstood about non-visible disabilities, and what tends to happen to people whose conditions aren't easily recognized or accommodated?
Right. Thank you, Mariam, for that question. And I would like to say, giving a statistic that, um, out of all the people with disabilities, around 80% of them non-visible disabilities. Only 20% of disabilities are visible. Now, and the greater is that if a disability is non-visible, it is not there. So something which is not visible is absent. And when that happens, so imagine you are experiencing a lot of pain. And I'm saying pain because that is a universal experience. All of us experience pain at some point of the or the other, right? And it is one of the first indicators that you might have a disease or there might be something wrong in your body and you might require medical intervention, right? So all of us have experienced pain, and when that pain exceeds a threshold, it becomes almost, it becomes extremely difficult for us to manage. Now imagine someone who has been living with that pain 24/7 for many years of their life. Now they're in a workplace and they're telling their managers that they cannot sit beyond a specific time limit, and they require some rest to lie down, or some sort of accommodation And the manager is saying that, but you look fine. You don't look disabled. Why do you need support? So there's a constant advocacy that takes place with the managers, with the with the peers, with the board members, all of them, and it just gets exhausting. Um, you know, at one point. Um, and when so and so this is the thing, and then there is constant questioning, constant assumption that the person looks fine, so they will be able to meet targets, they will be able to deliver as per the non-disabled standards, right? Which is not often the case, and as Tanzila, very rightly mentioned, that this constant questioning, this constant invalidation of one's disability leads to it dents one's self-esteem uh, in ways we cannot even fathom. An individual feels that there's a lot of internalized ableism happening. So ableism is when we judge people as per the non-disabled standards. It is the discrimination that disabled people face due to inaccessibility and all the barriers that surround us. And when that when those feelings go inwards within the person with a disability, it leads to internalized ableism. So after all of this advocacy, all of this emotional labor, the person starts to question their self-worth. Am I even worthy? Is my disability so bothersome to people around me? Or am I good for nothing? So these questions start coming up, and eventually people have to lose their jobs. I have come across people who do not have even basic, basic amount of income to make ends meet. They do not have the money to even get plate on their food, food on their plates. They do not even have money for their medicines, which is essential for their survival. And if we look at the global statistics, we will say that disabled people earn much lesser than non-disabled people, and the daily wage gap is massive. And at the same time, we also need more money to be able to do basic things. For example, I use a wheelchair, and my wheelchair costs me 1.6 lakh Indian rupees, which is a massive amount of money for a person like me. So all of these cumulative factors just make it very, very difficult for a person with a disabilities to survive, and they further widen the gap between the person, the society, employment, and all of those things.
Thank you, Kavya. I think you've highlighted a very important aspect of inclusion, in terms of the differences in wages, and also that the disability may not be immediately visible, but making empathy and understanding and appropriate workplace support even more essential in those cases. Isma, coming to you next, how do we build from a meaningful pathway from early intervention and education to independent adulthood, vocational opportunities, and neuro-inclusive workplaces, and where is the system currently failing?
Sorry, I did that again.
It's okay.
Yeah. So that's a great question, Mariam. Thank you. And because I actually think the answer begins much earlier than most people imagine. So before I answer that, I'd like to invite everyone to reflect on one simple question. We spend years helping a neurodivergent child develop their communication, independence, and confidence. But what happens when they turn 18? If your answer is uncertainty, then we found where the system is failing. So as a behavior analyst, I probably see this conversation a little differently, because when I hear the phrase neuro-inclusive workplace, I don't think about recruitment first. I think about childhood. So for the past 13 years, I've worked with neurodivergent children, with their families, particularly autistic, as I've mentioned, and every skill we teach has adulthood in mind. whether we're teaching communication, emotional regulation, independence, problem solving, daily living skills. Our goal isn't simply to prepare a child for school, it's also to prepare them for life. So if we have parents on the panel discussion and in the audience as well, I'd like to highlight that if your child is capable of learning a skill, let them learn it. Resist the temptation to do everything for them or anticipate their need, whether it's communicating, getting dressed, solving a problem, because every skill they learn today builds independence, which they're going to need tomorrow. So what we do as professionals is we don't do the things for the children. We teach them the skills so that they can do it independently. But this is where I believe one of the biggest gaps exists. So families invest years supporting their children. Yet once their formal education comes to an end, they're left asking this question, what happens next? And for too many neurodivergent young individuals, there's no clear pathway into further educational, vocational training centers or meaningful employment. I mean, in Karachi, at least, for the city I'm from, I can only think of one vocational training center. And I do get this question very often, that what happens next? So to change this, we need to stop viewing employment as a single destination and instead see it as the final stage of a much longer journey. And that journey begins with early identification and then continues through quality education, life skills, and then is strengthened by vocational training and apprenticeships, internships, etc. And in my experience, the most successful approach is flexible. So some students thrive in a one-to-one environment, some thrive in mainstream schools. And let's talk a little bit about the word inclusion, which has been used very, very commonly now, but I think that the understanding of the word is not very well understood. Is that too often inclusion is measured by how many students are sitting in the mainstream classrooms, which we had a speaker mention. It's not the quota. And it's about meaningful inclusion isn't about if they're sitting in school. It's about whether they're learning, participating, and they actually belong. It should never be it's token. It's like schools say, oh, we have a quota of 4 children. Include them, so they put them in the school, but reality is there's no pathway for them to learn, and that is the problem that we need to work on. So I think the biggest shift is we need to stop asking what can't this child do, and instead ask what are they interested in, what are they good at, and then we can identify their strengths early and build opportunities around those interests. And by the time the individual reaches employment, the workplace is simply the next step in that journey. So ultimately, building neuro-inclusive workspaces doesn't begin at the interview. It begins in childhood. Our responsibility is to build a meaningful pathway from early intervention, which is what we've focused on, because that's where it really begins, and then education into dependent adulthood, vocational opportunities, so that they have the opportunity to reach their full potential in a working environment as well.
Thank you, Isma. I think that really reinforces the idea that workplace inclusion begins long before employment and depends on these strong support systems through a person's life, which you mentioned. Janet, over to you. You have mentored 500 plus young people and worked with multinational companies and grassroots organizations alike. What's the biggest gap you see between how large corporates and smaller or local organizations approach neuro-inclusion?
Thank you for that very apt question. So, with my given experience in working with large companies, corporates, multinational companies, and then of course at grassroots level, both of them do have their own processes. They do think about neuro-inclusion. Grassroots level, they do understand the ground realities more often, and they do think about the person first. They do think about, okay, how do you think? How do you work? And then, of course, this is our process. This is how it can evolve. It's a very flexible approach, and it's much more easier to change as well. And I do understand multinational companies, they did start from the ground, and then they did build all these procedures in place to safeguard and to make sure that their companies thrive as well. Understanding that in mind, the biggest gap is now when they do need to gap. So I worked with the attempt to build corporates and then also to bring in neuro-inclusive people with disabilities of all forms. So they do have that standard of coming, okay, this is our standard, this is our job description, if you will, and then the people with disabilities are there and they're coming in, and now they're trying to fit. Corporates do try to fit. And when that happens, it's not going to work because they're not focusing on, we have the standard, let's fit this person into this. Not going to work. So that's the biggest gap. It's to understand, okay, the ground reality is such that we can't expect a person with visual impairment to sit in an interview and do right again. There are methods to come up with a CV, written CV. Now tech is there, but it's much more easier for them to do in an interview, a video-based CV to be sent in. For a person who actually have anxiety, facing an unseen situation, unseen location gives them a lot of anxiety. So why not give them the space? Okay, this is our space beforehand. And this is our space, this is what we do, and this is where you're going to sit. And this is how we are going to do this interview. Or better yet, get them have these options of bringing in their CVs, coming in with their CVs in their own way that is comfortable for them. So the biggest gap in summary is grassroots understand the person, corporates understand the system, and there's a lot of hierarchy, demands, and then procedures in place, even to get access accommodation. So why not be flexible and bring in the grassroots system, and also corporates evolve the culture as you go along, because time passes and time evolves.
Thank you, Janet. I think it's interesting to hear the different, sort of challenges that both the corporates and more smaller organizations face, and also the unique opportunities that they have to, make small changes for meaningful progress. So we are moving towards the last and final round of questions, and in this round we'll focus on workplace culture and societal attitude. Some of it, we've already talked about. We've spoken about policy and practice, but lasting change also depends on how organizations, they think about neurodiversity. And Tanjila so rightly mentioned that, if you have somebody who is neurodivergent at the top, they have a better understanding than a board who has absolutely no lived experience and don't understand the challenges. So, how leaders can shape inclusive cultures and how societies can recognize neurodivergent talent. Just also want to let you know that if you can keep your responses as slightly brief, because we do want to take some questions towards the end. So Tanjila, if very briefly, if you can, coming back to you, if you can tell us about in Bangladesh, stigma and policy environment around neurodivergence differs from its neighbors. What specific barriers or opportunities do you see for employers in Bangladesh right now?
Thank you, Mariam. Like I said, Bangladesh passed both the Rights and Protection of Persons with Disability Act and the Neurodevelopment Disability Trust Act in 2013. However, the gap between the written law and what actually changed in workplace and classrooms remained enormous. So it will be somewhat fair to say that the barrier is not really policy recognition in Bangladesh, but the real barrier is enforcement and private sector ownership. More so, for within the private sector ownership, the stigma around neurodivergence is also disproportionate, because like one of the speakers said, that neurodivergence is often invisible, which means it's more likely to be misread as a discipline or attitude problem by an untrained or unaware manager, rather than being recognized and accommodated. I also want to touch upon a little bit on what Isma had said about starting at childhood. So I think in Bangladesh or, across the region, I would say that it's a two-way problem that we are looking at this point. One is, are you allowing your child to have the right kind of education and training? Or do we as a system have the right kind of educational opportunities and training opportunities for children with neurodivergence so that they can achieve their full potential in terms of the kind of skills that's needed to enter the workforce? And in terms of employers, are we doing the right kind of sensitization, the right kind of trainings for the managers, the right kind of accommodations in workplaces, so that when these children are ready, they see a pathway into the workforce? And it's more complicated in South Asia, I think, because we have the formal sector in terms of employment and we have the informal sector in terms of employment. And the nuances are much more complex in the informal sector. So I think the first step would be to start with the formal employers in the private sector and sort of work step by step with them to help them reimagine what it could mean in terms of organizational benefit to be able to embrace neurodivergent individuals into the work stream.
Thank you, Tanjila. I think local context is essential, when you're designing solutions for both practical reasons and sustainable reasons. Kavya, turning to you, you have a wide reach to a vast and diverse global audience through your digital content on disability stigma, connecting with over 100,000 people from that scale of engagement. What have you learned about actually shifting attitudes versus just raising awareness? And do you think that translates into how organizations should approach culture change internally?
Right, absolutely. So thank you for that question. It's a really important one. So awareness is definitely important, but awareness alone, really changes behavior. So it alone cannot lead to anything. We can combine it with other aspects and other programs. So, and while creating disability related content online, so there are two things that I learned. So one is that facts make people think, and stories make people feel, and lived experiences are what help people really understand things in a better perspective and in an authentic way. Um, so I use humor, lived experiences, and relatable everyday situations to actually help understand the barriers that people might have never seen before. And you know, many of my friends have told me that these are things we never noticed before meeting you. And that is exactly the situation of many and almost every non-disabled person out there, that they've never met a disabled person in their life. So it's not about ignorance, it's just about connection, you know. Second is that attitude change doesn't happen through guilt. So we cannot tell people that, you're missing this, or you've not done this, you're in the wrong. We can't let that happen because people become defensive when they're blamed. So we have to navigate that in a very mindful way, and we have to take a curious approach rather, because when they become curious, they feel that they're invited into the conversation. And these are the exact things that can apply to organizations as well. Like for example, mandatory or one-off acceptance of reasonable accommodations, they often don't create lasting change. And this is largely the ideology that once we grant some reasonable accommodation, once we give an ergonomic chair to a person, our job is done. We don't need to make any other changes. But we need to realize that it's like a journey. It's like a cumulative approach, and it has to be taken at each and every step. And culture shifts when inclusion becomes part of everyday practice. So it doesn't have to be a one day thing. It needs to be a lifelong thing. It needs to happen every day in some way or the other. As Tanzila mentioned, as other panelists also mentioned, that there needs to be representation in the workforce in all forms. So if you're talking about staff members, if you're talking about board members, there needs to be disability representation at all members. disabled people need to be consulted not after the policy has been implemented, but before the policy is shaped. Um, and so accessibility also needs to be considered right from the beginning and not as an afterthought, like we discussed. So yeah, these are some of my thoughts.
Thank you, Kavya. I think that's a powerful thought over there. It's a journey. It's not a one-time chair. It's not a one-off accommodation. It's a lived life of your employee. And I think one of you mentioned it's not a favor that you're doing to them. It's a favor you're doing to yourself because you're making them more productive at work also. Isma, I'd like to get your perspective on this. What misconceptions continue to prevent society and employers from recognizing neurodivergent talent, and how can we shift from focusing on the limitations to creating a truly inclusive workplace?
Okay, so I think one of the biggest misconceptions is that neurodivergence is defined by limitations rather than strengths. So too often we ask, what can't this person do? Even when a parent comes to me and brings their child, they say, oh, they can't do this, 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 this. But I'm like, but what can they do? So instead of asking what they can't do, what we can do is ask what they can do. And I believe that shift in thinking will truly help in your inclusive workspaces to begin with. So another common misconception is that creating neuro-inclusive workplaces is difficult, expensive, or unrealistic. The reality is that many organizations around the world have already shown us that it can be done successfully. So let me give you a few examples that already exist. Microsoft has a autism hiring program, which has replaced traditional interviews with practical skills and assessments, where we've seen interviews have given a lot of importance. This is like, no, let's see what they can practically do. EY has established neurodiverse centers of excellence where neurodivergent professionals contribute in areas such as data and cybersecurity. So they're at the back end, they're not doing the social aspect. But again, they're working on their strengths. JP Morgan's Chase Autism at Work program. They also have a program which is adapted recruitment in a way that helps hire such individuals. And even Dell Technologies, these are all brands I'm sure we've all heard of, has introduced a neurodiversity hiring program with inclusive recruitment. So these organizations didn't lower their standards, they just broadened how they recognized talent. So I think the better question is, can neurodivergent individuals, so the better question isn't, can neurodivergent individuals succeed in a workplace? It's rather, are workplaces designed to recognize different talents? Because traditional recruitment, as we all know, often rewards confidence in interviews and social interaction. But these aren't the only qualities that make someone an excellent employee. Many individuals bring exceptional creativity, attention to detail, honesty, persistence. And we all know that we've hired or worked with individuals who were hired on a good interview, or they spoke well, or they were confident. But the reality is they didn't always deliver in their work. So it's very important to rewire and reconsider how do employers hire individuals. And I think another misconception that we all perhaps could relate to is that success looks the same for everyone. Instead of expecting everyone to follow the same educational or career path, we all know doctors, engineers is what is reinforced in our society. But instead, we can focus on what is that individual's strengths and how can we create opportunities for them to thrive, be it music, art. Doesn't have to necessarily be the careers that we've grown up seeing. So for me, truly creating a neuro-inclusive workplace isn't about lowering your expectations. The shift is about recognizing human potential and removing unnecessary barriers through inclusive recruitment and clear communication. So if organizations around the world have shown that it's possible, then the question for us in South Asia isn't whether we can do it, it's about how quickly we're willing to start doing it. And that's the shift that needs to happen sooner than later.
Thank you, Isma. That's that's very interesting that you reframe the conversation around strengths and potential, and that has certainly emerged as one of the key themes from today's discussion. Janet, turning to you, what does a genuinely neuro-inclusive workplace culture look like in practice, beyond accommodations and policy, and how do organizations build that culture, not just implement it?
All right. So very quickly, it goes beyond, as the very start we mentioned, beyond the policy document. Practically, how can we do this? How can we evolve policies practically? And then it can look like, so universal design should be the fundamental base that we build for each and every one in a workplace, starting from education, childhood, as Isma mentioned, and then it can, so practicality wise, let me pinpoint three things and then close my remarks. It could be sending meeting agendas, pre-reads 24 hours before a meeting. It can be normalizing communication so people aren't judged on how they communicate, but as Isma mentioned, how well they deliver on their promises, what they are hired for, and giving people autonomy over their physical or sensory environment without requiring the hierarchy or the procedures to say, let's have a doctor's note. Probably we can maybe not have that. We'll see how we can do that. So as the entire conversation was about, let's start from the top. Let's be vulnerable at the top. Rather than HR sending an email, let's be open about how we communicate, how we work, how can we adapt as an organization, and shift from permission to autonomy. Move from asking, why do you need this? Let's have every possible way of functioning, communicating, readily available. It's not expensive. It's not at all expensive. It's already built in systems, as we heard from, again, Isma. I'm taking Isma's conversation points here. So when you build a culture where nobody has to apologize for how they work and how their brain functions, we stop managing compliance and start unlocking human potential, because each and everyone's normal is different.
Thank you, Janet. I think that's a wonderful way to bring this discussion full circle, reminding us that lasting inclusion is embedded in culture, leadership, and everyday behaviors. Before we move towards the Q&A, I like to, truly a massive thank you to all of our speakers. They've enlightened us with their knowledge and experience. We do have some interesting questions, but before we move to Q&A, I would like to request the audience to take a minute and provide us with their valuable feedback. The link is in the chat box. Harun, if you can please share the link to the feedback form. And if you plan on providing the feedback after the session concludes in your own time, please make sure that you copy and paste the link, as the chat box will disappear after we end this session. So we are just going to take a 1-minute pause and then we'll move towards the Q&A. And for the Q&A, I would like to invite my colleague, Rabia Hatim, who's going to help us manage the question and answer session.
Thank you, Mariam. I believe I'll start now. Thank you to all the
Rabia,
speakers.
Rabia, can we just wait for a minute and then we'll begin?
Yeah, sure.
We can begin now.
Yeah, I hope
Please go
everyone's had a
ahead.
chance to copy the feedback link or click on the feedback link. Thank you to all the speakers for such an amazing session today. And we do have a lot of questions. I will begin with my first question, which has been directed towards Kavya. Kavya, there's a question for you, that how can young professionals and community leaders contribute to creating accessible and inclusive communities for people with disabilities?
So my first most advice is always to engage with disabled people, and social media is a wonderful platform to do that. Um, Engage with them, follow them, see what they post. Also try to educate your own self around disability. What is the discourse like? What do people with disabilities, actually feel about? What are the barriers that they experience? Um, so I think these practices are a great starting point. Also reading books by disabled people, Tiffany Yu, Emily Ladau. So there's a whole lot of list out there, on these books. Watching films around disability. Crip Camp on Netflix is a wonderful watch. Please do watch that. Um, and then also reading up uh, uh, documents like guidelines on disability etiquette by UNICEF. Um, so that is also a great starting point to understand the disability discourse. Um, yeah, I think this would be, and of course, engaging in panels like these, listening to disabled people themselves, also be one of the things that can be done.
That's great. Yes, to get a perspective on the actual, what disabled people go through and what their experiences is like is very important. Thank you, Kavya. We do have a question for Isma. Isma, what one practical low-cost first step would you suggest for a South Asian company with no dedicated budget that it can take to become more neuro-inclusive?
So I think one of the first practical steps is to, depending on the type of individual, would be to, a lot of the individuals we work with like having schedules, visual schedules, and that's easy to implement, and letting them know the plan for the day or the month or whatever in advance, so that they're able to mentally prepare what is expected of them, because generally they like to know what's coming and not unexpected changes. So I think visual schedules and pre-planning or pre-preparing them for what is expected of them and clearly defining expectations, because it's easier for them to understand what is required of them.
That's interesting. Yeah, that's really good. Visuals, retention is also better when it's visually in front of you. So yeah, that's really good. I do have another question. Tanjila, would you like to take this question? So we talked about during the panel, you guys talked about policy documents. So given that a lot of these policy documents remain unrecognized in many South Asian countries, what are your views on recognizing neurodivergence and increasing the recognition of neurodivergence, along with how higher education institutions can empower neurodivergence for workplace and lifelong learning?
Thank you. That's a very complex question. I think there are two segments in that question. One is how can we have better recognition or enforcement of these policy documents? I think this is a space where non-government organizations and civil society has a role to play in shaping mindsets across all verticals, like whether it be within the state system, within academia, within private sector market. So I think a lot of civil society organizations are already doing great jobs in advocating at a grassroots level, but we see a lack of unified approach in that. So I think that is something. It will happen with time. It's not an easy road. It took many years for us to any kind of change that happens at a systemic level. It takes a lot of time. So I would say that it took us so many years to reach even this point of women empowerment, where we are not truly even empowered, I would say. So it will take a long pathway and a long, I would say, struggle, war, to against the system to be able to have that unified approach. But the work is happening. So it's not like it's stagnant, but we need to see more momentum there. In terms of academia, I think academia or academic institutions are in a more suitable position to start off with having like practical steps in place to embrace neurodivergence in their student body. And I think it's not talked extensively about schooling, early childhood, and childhood education. I think universities have a great role to play in this. So if we can all be advocates in our own sphere and in our own educational institutions where we come from, to sort of start pushing this agenda and take it personally, even if it's not directly affecting us. You would think it's not directly affecting you, but at the end of the day, when it's affecting your country's overall GDP, it is affecting you. So I would say, if we can, everyone who's on this webinar listening and speaking, if we can start taking things personally and pushing this forward, that can also be substantial change.
That's a great answer. Thank you. Yes. Thank you so much, Tanjila. I do have another question, Janet, if you could take this one. So if resources are limited, which evidence suggests that investing more in neuro-inclusion could take precedence over addressing other barriers such as socioeconomic inequality, religious inclusion, or broader structural inequities, how would organizations make those trade-offs?
Well, that's a very loaded question, and I actually close my eyes to process that. And again, so to understand that question, again, I believe it's a, how do I say this? Don't take neuro-inclusion as something that is very much a bigger, I can't, or we as an organization can't do this. As I started off my conversation, each and every one of us have a diverse way of thinking. Don't take neuro-inclusion as, okay, it's a big thing. And of course, there are people who really think differently. And how do we actually accommodate, support them? You don't have to do it by yourself. Know your organizational hierarchy. Do not have to do it by themselves if you do not know. If you do not know, you do not know. That is where people with lived experience do come in. They are there to make you understand how do I, as a person, best provide the support that you need for your organization. And to be quite frank, you don't need policies to be there to help a person, support a person. You are actually supporting people in your organizations. Even without policies, as people, as humans, remove all your labels. As humans, we are supporting them. So, yes, if you don't have to do everything at once. Pick what you can focus on, and do that one thing as best as you can with the support, with the lived experiences, with people, as many of our speakers said, read about it, learn about it. No shame in not knowing. The shame is not taking action to actually know, because all the panelists here and all the people here do not know everything, but we know something. Learn from one another, learn from people who have done it, and do the best that you can. And as we always say, work with people who know it, who live it. So, and pick what you can do best. And I hope that loaded question was answered, but feel free to again.
Yeah, no, that's a really good answer. And this also addresses a misconception, I guess, that you need a lot of resources to, inform people, bring that different perspective. If you so we invited you, and so that kind of gives other people perspective as well, and it doesn't take a lot of resources.
Absolutely. And all these things, let's take captions, let's take, some of you might be, doing your work in your workplaces right now. You might not even looking at the screen. That is you processing information the way that fits your workplace right now, current state of mind right now. You might not even, listening to my voice. You might be just muted and then turning on captions
True.
and just
true.
looking at it. That's completely fine because that's how you process information. So you do not need millions. You need people and their experiences to support you. They're there. They will support you in whatever way, in whatever point in time you are with regards to neuro-inclusion or universal design or any technical term that we did mention here.
That's a brilliant answer. Thank you so much, Janet. I think that brings us to the end of Q&A because we're running out of time, but thank you to everyone, and over to you, Mariam.
Thank you, Rabia. I wish we could take this session on for longer, but unfortunately, that's what happens. I hope you enjoyed this conversation today, and my hope is that, all of you become advocates in whatever capacity possible, wherever you are. You can do something, and as Janet rightly said, that it does not take a lot of resources. It does not take a lot of effort. Educate yourself, ask questions, and the thing that you don't want to do is do nothing. So with that, I'd like to thank the fantastic speakers that we have today. Thank you so much for making the time and coming on our platform, talking to our UK Alumni Society. We hope that you could join us in our future events as well. Have a very lovely rest of the week. Take care to our lovely audiences as well who asked so many questions and we couldn't include your question. We are very apologetic, but we really enjoyed your company and your comments alongside. Thank you. Take care and have the good rest of the week.
Thank you, everyone. Siti,
Thank you,
Nandri, and
everyone.
Shukran.
Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.
Thank you so much.